Welcome to Radio Amenti, embracing the eternal now where minds and timelines merge, inspiring synchronicity, awakening potential, and making sense of change. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. This is episode 0 of Radio Amenti, and I am your host, Jennifer Sodini. Now, before we get into full-on episodes of interviews and conversation, I felt it would be important to introduce myself to you all, why I am starting this project, what this project means to me, what I hope to inspire through the episodes that I share, and the overarching why. So, who am I, and why am I here? Isn't that the question that we all ask? Who am I, and why am I here? Well, who am I? I am Jennifer. My friends call me Jen, so feel free to refer to me as Jen. I have been working in conscious media since 2013, but prior to that, I've always been in and out of media and creative endeavors. My story of how I got into conscious media is a story I've told many times through various interviews and podcasts, but here, with it being my platform, that steering and commanding, I guess. Commanding, what a weird word. I'd say steering and curating. I want to give you the raw, unedited version of my why. So, back in how far back should we go? Go back to the beginning, I guess. So my entire life, I have been a very sensitive person who has been tuned into other realities beyond what is seen. You know, my whole life I've dreamed things, they've come true. I've felt things, they've happened. I've always had this gift of inner sight. And it's been paradoxical in many ways because as a highly intuitive person, I can tend to be the type of person that has her head in the clouds and has lost her grounding and footing many a times. But in the process of falling awake, I've fallen into a deeper understanding of the human condition and how we are all beautifully broken and all have the abilities to see beyond what we can see by looking within to understand without. Growing up, my parents separated when I was 3 years old. My mom was a flight attendant and worked for United Airlines, and my dad was building a business. Two of them had their own drama and lives and whatever was going on. So I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, and my grandmother, my father's mother, was like my second mother. Growing up at her house, they had a shore house in this town called Belmar, New Jersey, which is it's a beautiful, quaint little beach town, but turns into a bit of party time in the summer for the adults. But growing up in Belmar and Inlet Terrace with my grandparents, I had a really beautiful, strange, incredible childhood. My grandmother was very much into the occult and metaphysical realities, and to her, culture and art and theater and travel was of the utmost importance. So my grandmother's living room, oftentimes Puccini's Turandot would be playing on a record as whatever topic of debate was happening at the dinner table. And the living room had Hieronymus Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delight at the foot of the staircase, and then adjacent to that was Goya's painting of Saturn devouring his son. Very homey artwork, not quite, but Beyond that, my grandmother always really impressed upon me the idea of writing my experiences and traveling and understanding the world. So when I was younger, she took me on trips to Alaska and to Virginia and to Washington, D.C., and would have me write down in my little kitty journal, like literally a kitty was on the cover of my journal, about my experiences. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized what she was really doing for me, which was pretty incredible. My grandmother also, part of our learning experiences together in the 12 years I had her in my life, she had a deck of oracle cards that they're of unknown origin. To this day, I don't know where she got them, where they came from. In all of my own research, I have not been able to find a deck that matches it. And my creative partner, Richie, I say creative partner because there's no other title that is really adequate to explain my relationship with Richie, but you'll come to find that out in other episodes, as he will be on the show quite a bit. Richie, when he and I first met and he knew about my grandmother's oracle deck, was fascinated about it because this deck of unknown origins is super powerful. So he actually created an oracle deck photo series based off of my grandmother's deck called the Brown Magic Oracle, which he sells. I think it's actually currently sold out, but I digress. My grandmother taught me how to read oracle cards at a very young age. And because of that, it really nurtured my intuition and creativity. And because of her and my formative years, I really credit her for setting the foundation of the woman I would evolve into being, or rather nurturing the person I've always been. Unfortunately, my grandmother passed away when I was 12 years old. She went in for heart surgery, and when they opened her up, they found that she had some kind of weird abnormality that they didn't expect. Unfortunately, she wound up dying on the table, and it was one of I guess that death was my initiation into loss, and started a butterfly effect of many events to happen from there. My grandmother had in her will that, my grandmother hated the Catholic Church. This is something else. I grew up without religion. I wasn't baptized. I was told that the Catholic Church is corrupt, priests are pedophiles. To my own detriment, growing up in a waspy area without religion was really challenging, but constantly being told by kids that I was going to go to hell because I wasn't baptized, even though I believed in something greater than myself. That was always interesting. But in her will, she had put that if any of us went to a Catholic or cult-like institution, we wouldn't have our college paid for. And in her will, she also specified that her ashes be spread to Flight of the Valkyries by Wagner. So, like a scene from a movie, the day we spread my grandmother's ashes into the ocean, Wagner's Flight of the Valkyries played, and thus a chapter of the initiation into loss thus began. Soon after my grandmother died, my grandfather disregarded all of my grandmother's wishes and basically wound up immediately remarrying a woman that spouted the law of attraction but used it for only material gain.
Got hold of them because you're running the show with your vibration completely. So what you want to say to each and every one of them is, I'm so glad to meet you. You're going to behave exactly as I create you to do. And they're going to say, wait a minute, don't I have free will? Not my world.
Like a locust came in and destroyed our family, just took all my grandmother's things, either threw them out, kept her for her own, and had my grandfather sell the house. And my whole life as I knew it was disrupted. And because of that, it sent me further into seeking why and what it all means. I was really into witchcraft. I had my grandmother's occult books on witchcraft and demonology, but something about it didn't quite satiate my hunger for wanting to know more. Then in high school, I read a lot on like Aristotle's metaphysics. I had a base understanding of Buddhism and was really fascinated by that. But then getting into like senior year, I started to put a lot of that stuff to the side and had my first long-term boyfriend and began to kind of closet my spiritual proclivities because I just wanted to be cool, and it wasn't cool at that time like it is now to be a witch. I actually in 7th and 8th grade, I remember walking home from school and having rocks thrown at me because not only was I into witchcraft, but I loved Marilyn Manson. So I just didn't want to be made fun of anymore. So I closeted it and didn't really talk about it anymore. And then from 17 to 20, I was just kind of caught up in having a boyfriend, wanting to just be accepted by people, have my outer self be the projection of what I wanted the world to see and feel. And I closeted a lot of my inner beliefs and dreams and premonitions. So here we are, we get to 20. At 20, I never had that great of a relationship with my dad. My dad was a really complicated character. And throughout my life, we were like two ships passing in the night. So I spent time with my father. I spent weekends with my father, but he never really understood me. And then as I got older, I finally started to develop a relationship with my dad outside of high school. But a week after I turned 21, my dad died. We were on our flight home from Las Vegas for a trade show, and my dad was complaining that his right arm was numb and tingly. I got really scared and I wanted to go to the hospital, and he didn't want to. That night, as synchronicity would have it, as we got picked up from the airport from the limo, we were in this weird van that had, the doors that opened in the back weren't your typical type of doors. And on the ride home, we hit a road bump and it made the doors of the trunk fly open. And when the doors flew open, my dad's suitcase and the suitcase of his coworker, Bill, both flew out, but the rest of our suitcases remained. So by the time we got to my dad's house, he realized that his luggage was gone. And I guess there was a lot of money in that luggage. And Bill's luggage was gone. So the two of them decided to take off to go try and retrace the steps and find their luggage. That night I went to go stay at my boyfriend's house. It was right before Valentine's Day. And I remember that night getting a phone call from Bill, his colleague, and telling me that my father had had a stroke. So I guess when my dad and him went to go find their luggage, they didn't have any luck. So they came back, ordered some fast food, and Bill, being a light sleeper in the middle of the night, heard a big thud. And when he came up, he found my dad in a pile of his own vomit and in the midst of a stroke. Bill then called an ambulance. The ambulance came, take him off to the hospital. And when Bill called me, he had called me from the hospital to let me know where we're at. So my dad spent a month in a coma. And we had come to find that the stroke he had had was actually caused by cancer that was in his bone and spread to his kidney and then spread to his brain. Because of the stroke, the right side of his body had gone numb, and we didn't know whether he was going to make it or what was going to happen. After a month in, I just kept praying and meditating and hoping that I would be able to speak to my dad again, that I'd be able to hear his voice, and that he would be able to wish me a happy 21st birthday. And little by little, he started to come out of the coma and regain consciousness, but it just wasn't the same for him. He was able to, by the time it was my birthday, wish me a happy birthday, but it was really the beginning of the end. And, like I said, a week after I turned 21, we got a call from the hospital telling us that my father had a second stroke, and this time he wasn't going to make it. So we had to prepare for the worst and to come up. And what the worst looked like was either hospice or, he could die that day. So that day, my cousin and I drove up to the hospital, and he, myself, and a bunch of his friends and most of my family members actually were in the room with him. And it was a very strange thing because I held my dad's hand and we were all there with him to let him know that it was okay for him to go. And that was the day he died. He died while I was holding his hand. And it was really strange because he was in a room where nobody else was. And all of a sudden the TV went on right when he died. And it was strange because I'd never had a phenomena with ghosts or with spirit moving and waking life. All of my psychic proclivities and revelations always happened in the dream state, not in the waking state. And when he died and the TV went on, it was like, oh my God. And then I remember we left the hospital, and around that time I was in love with the show 6 Feet Under. And I still love that show. Every few years I'll rewatch it. But that show, the series finale, had one of the most beautiful series finales I'd ever seen. And a song by Sia called Breathe Me was a song that I listened to a lot at the time. So I went into my car. I had never had an issue with my car radio before. And as I went to put on Sia's Breathe Me to just breathe and process what I had just experienced, my car radio started to glitch out. And it was like, it's very strange, very weird energy. That day it was also raining, and then right after he died, the rain parted, and it was kind of this experience that set the butterfly wing movement forward even more. Because, having lost my grandmother at 12 years old and losing my dad a week after I turned 21, these experiences of seeing and feeling and living through death were what felt like really profound chapters and milestones in my life that set the course of my destiny. My grandmother, losing my dad, the timing was really strange. Being 21 was not easy. After my dad died, I came into money, and I mismanaged money because I was very irresponsible. And the executor of my father's estate, I don't think really wanted the job. So, I think he could have done better, but he did the best that he could. I believe, I choose to believe. It was a really awful, terrible time. From 21 to 25, I spent a good chunk of that time partying in New York at appropriately 666 Greenwich. And my dreams were out of control. I dreamt about my dad often. I dreamt about things that were happening all the time, but I was just numbing myself so much that I didn't really give a shit or care or think it meant anything. All that mattered to me then was to just numb the pain of what I was feeling and to be perceived as important to others, because I didn't feel important to myself. And I felt like my family had abandoned me, and my relationship with my mom was and is and always has been super toxic. It was the worst of times. I don't want to say the best of times too. It was really awful. But, when I was 25, I got into a relationship with somebody that was the first person I thought that, wow, this is the person I'm going to marry. We met through crazy synchronicity that felt like divinely orchestrated, almost like an act of God. It was the first time in my life I ever experienced love at first sight. And we really learned a lot about each other. And he is an integral part of my story because in the most bizarre way, this cosmic mirror helped me refine my reflection and come to understand who I truly am and to be the person I am today. So when we met, I had this whirlwind relationship. I moved in with him, and that was not without its challenge. But about a year into our relationship, of all people, the situation from MTV's Jersey Shore, his family were our neighbors.
As far as I know, everybody loves the situation. And if you don't love the situation, I want to make you love the situation.
My ex was a software engineer and a genius computer programmer, probably like Bill Gates, Steve Jobs level genius. And somehow they met and they hired him to do their website they had a company called MPS Entertainment. So they hire him, and he had pitched an idea at that time. So at that time, Mike was getting really bad press because he had just gotten out of rehab. And this is before Facebook's algorithms changed. And he had pitched to them the idea that I write pop culture blogs for Mike under a blog that we create and use Mike's social media to feed traffic to it. And for me, I was just like, this is so ridiculous, but this is a really interesting opportunity. I'm going to take it and make the most of it and see what's going on. And let me backtrack a little bit too, because when I first met my ex, he was a first generation Russian American Jew and his whole family's Jewish. And I, having in my New York heyday, met a lot of Jewish friends, and I actually really connected to the Kabbalah and felt like if I were ever to convert to a religion, that one would make sense to me because of the longstanding history, how every holiday has a meaning, blah, blah, blah. Basically, I had offered to convert to Judaism to be with him because I wanted to pay respect to his family. And I also felt like, okay, I want to learn about this religion and this makes sense to me. So I'd spent the past year working with a Reform rabbi who I absolutely adore and admire to this day. Both he and his wife are rabbis, and through him I learned a lot. And I actually went flying in a plane with him, which is like crazy. But I digress. So that was where my spiritual proclivities were at this time. I had believed I met my soulmate. I was converting to Judaism. I was still having crazy psychic dreams, but I was dating somebody that was like hyper logical and didn't really care to talk about the psychic stuff or spiritual stuff. So I get hired to work for the situation. I'm working there. It's super weird. I actually become very close with his brother, Frank, who now goes by Maximo. He's a very actually kind being. And judge me all you want, judge him all you want. I do have to say that irregardless of his past or life path, Mike, the situation, has taken excellent care of his family and not only employed his mother, sister, and brothers, also took care of us really well. So I have nothing bad to say about him. He was always kind and gracious to me. And reality TV is awful and not something that I care to promote or to get behind. But I was young. I took the opportunity, and he is a part of this story and is a good human being. There's nothing bad that I will say about him. So as I'm looking for content on this journey, working in pop culture, around the time of like 2011, all this content started coming out about the December 21st, 2012 being the end of the world, how the Mayan calendar predicted it, how the end is coming. And I started researching this and it kept coming up all the time. And it really scared me. And I was starting to freak out. I was like very, very gullible at that time too. And it was just really sent me down this rabbit hole of what does the end of the world mean? Why is this happening? And my dreams started to really kick into high gear again. And I remember it was the summer of 2012 when it really started to get crazier. So my ex and I went to San Diego, and I remember on the plane ride home seeing an ad for the movie Baraka. It was an article for the movie Baraka, just talking about, I guess, the anniversary of it, and something about that word did something to me. And I remember when we came home, I watched that movie and I was like, oh my God, this did something. This is doing something. This is activating something within me. And then I started having these crazy dreams about flooding and how there's going to have to be evacuation and we have to escape and that the floods are coming and high weather alert. And pretty soon after that is when Superstorm Sandy happened and we were out of power for, God, it felt like almost 2 weeks. And how Superstorm Sandy wound up happening was exactly like I had dreamt it. And then around the time the Sandy Hook shootings happened, and all of this energy just started to feel overwhelming. As I was awakening and undergoing this process of transformation, he started really getting into the work of Terence McKenna and Alan Watts, and we were listening to their stuff all the time. And Terence McKenna was talking about that time as time wave zero, like the singularity and
an ebb and flow, an energy field that was in a constant state of flux. And they asked themselves, how many elements are necessary to describe this energy field?
It was just super interesting. And I remember we were just like, okay, well, all this stuff about psychedelics started coming to the forefront of consciousness too. which I had only ever done psychedelics once before. When I was in high school, I took psychedelics my senior year. I took mushrooms, and it was just like this beautiful trip where I was like, wow, life is beautiful. Why can't everything feel like this? But I didn't know it was something that you could use for inquiry in a ceremonial fashion to heal and to reveal greater truths. So that started coming into consciousness too. And I remember stumbling upon the work of Daniel Pinchbeck. And Daniel Pinchbeck had put out a documentary called 2012 Time for Change, which was the idea of how the apocalypse isn't the world ending, but rather as a revelation of truth. And now is a time where we're seeing beyond the veil and coming to understand that we've been navigating through an illusion and sold a lie. And now is the time to stop looking at the mirage and to start creating from a more heart-centered and sustainable place. And in the documentary, he had talked about something called ayahuasca. Ayahuasca was a word that I had actually heard years ago, but never really thought too much about, other than the fact that I read this award-winning essay by a girl that I had gone to high school with who broke her neck in a snowboarding accident, was told that she would be paralyzed from the neck down, would never walk again, but went down to Peru and did hundreds of experimental chiropractic sessions and combined with ayahuasca. And because of that, she was able to regain some mobility and can type and walk with a walker. And her essay that I read about how her wound existed before her injury stuck with me. And the idea of paralysis and being stuck in paralysis mentally, physically, emotionally is something that I think a lot of us suffer with, where if it doesn't manifest on a physical level, where you lose your ability to move, it manifests on an emotional level as well, where you lose your ability to move because you are stuck in a preconceived idea of what you are supposed to be and who you are supposed to be and what things are supposed to be. And that really resonated on a deep soul level. So all these new words like psychedelic, healing, ayahuasca, Mayan calendar, apocalypse were swirling as my dreams were getting more and more intense. And this feeling of change just permeated every fiber of my being. So on around the time of December 21st, 2012, my ex and I decided to take Terence McKenna's advice and go on a heroic journey to glean insight from the noosphere if the world was going to end or what was going to happen. And thus was one of the days that single-handedly changed the course of my destiny. So we went on the hero's journey. He stayed downstairs. I went upstairs. And when the hero's journey is about 5 grams on a fasted dose. Terence McKenna recommends 5 grams alone in the dark, but we did this during the day. We just woke up and did it fasted. So we went on the journey. When it started to hit me, I was like, fuck. What have I done? Why did I do this to myself? I'm fucking crazy. I'm dying now, and I'm dying. And somebody's going to have to tell my mom that I died from doing mushrooms. And this is just what a cosmic joke. What a fucking ridiculous thing that I'm going to have died from doing mushrooms because I thought the world was ending. True story. So, as I'm going through this and suffering and this agony of mental anguish, thinking that my life is over, I decided to finally surrender and just say, fuck it. Okay, if this is how I'm meant to go, then this is how I'm meant to go. So I will just surrender to the process. And as soon as I surrendered, I swear to God, it was like the gates of heaven opened, the angels came down and said, see, it is a cosmic joke. You spend your life suffering and attached and worried and fear and paralyzed out of fear. But you need to let go and to realize that you're always supported and safe, and that you are a divine being of light, and that you were put on this earth to love and to learn how to love and to teach others how to love. And that whole journey revealed to me my life path and purpose and what I've been put here to do, and essentially was like touching the hand of God. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced. I found God, and my ex found his purpose, which was not spirit, but it was the binary. He found zeros and ones, and I found the all of everything. So shortly after that, our relationship ended. I wound up leaving, working with the situation. I moved into a shitty little apartment in this town called Long Branch, gave up a life that probably would have been the easier path because we just became oil and water. And I decided to, at that time, Bitcoin, I had gotten into Bitcoin as an early adopter and had a fair amount of savings in Bitcoin. So I decided to take a portion of that savings and go down to Costa Rica to do ayahuasca for a retreat that Daniel Pinchbeck was hosting, because I felt like I had been emotionally paralyzed and I had been following a path that wasn't a path that I even really wanted, but thought that I wanted. And I wanted to get clarity of who I am and who I'm supposed to be and what it all means and why. So I took a little bit of Bitcoin, bought my trip to Costa Rica, went down to Guardia de Osa for 10 days with Daniel, did ayahuasca, and came to understand things in a way that I just can't even put words to. You know, Daniel had said in one of his books that in shamanic culture, synchronicity is a sign that you're on a right path. And before even working with the medicine, the first night that I was in Costa Rica, I had a dream, and this dream is what birthed Amenti. In this dream, and mind you, again, I will say this is before even doing ayahuasca or working with the medicine, I had woken up in complete lucidity and looked down a hallway, and at the end of this hallway, I saw a being in a spacesuit, and I remember saying in my dream, like, oh my God, it's an alien, I'm going to make contact, I can't even believe it. And as I go to walk closer to it and approach it, this alien being wasn't an alien at all. It was actually what looked like a Middle Eastern man in a spacesuit. And he took his helmet off and said to me, there is no alien, there is no other. Nothing is separate. All that matters in this life is that your heart is as light as this feather. And he pulled out a scale with a heart and a feather. I journaled the dream, went on to have my journey. And at that time, there wasn't Wi-Fi where we were. We were basically in this eco lodge in the middle of the jungle. And I had never read the Egyptian Book of the Dead. And when I got home and Googled what that meant, it took me to understanding that in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the weight of your soul is actually measured by your heart. And if your heart is as light as the feather of Ma'at, then you can pass through to the next life. And I stumbled upon this through the dreamscape. And that dream stuck with me forever because, to my own detriment, my heart has been my compass. And that dream set a course beyond anything I could have ever imagined. So when I came home from this journey, having that seed planted by my dream visitor, I came back and I started Evolve and Ascend, and I didn't know what I was doing. I started Evolve and Ascend on Squarespace. And first I thought like, okay, well, I had thought that maybe I wanted to become a personal trainer and figure a way to do personal training and then also have like a spiritual inspirational blog. And then it evolved to just being this spiritual and inspirational blog. And I was just writing about all the things that I was learning, and I wanted to do it in a way that was artistic and creative, because at that time, you know, summer of 2013, it wasn't like it is now where like there's a lot of really incredible spiritual blogs and conscious blogs. Back then, there was just a handful, and a lot of them I didn't resonate with. It was either one too far out there or too conspiratorial or not really good art. And my whole idea was to create this platform where the Library of Alexandria meets Andy Warhol's factory. And I was going to take the rest of the Bitcoin I had, invest it into building my business. And I basically just thought I had it all figured out. Quote that I love is, man plans, God laughs. So as I think I have it all figured out, I also realized that I want to write this kid's book on unity consciousness. I love Jim Henson, and I wanted to create like a Jim Henson-esque tale of unity consciousness and how we're all connected. So all these things. I was just filled with creative inspiration, thought that I had the course of my life figured out and that I was just supported and got this divine insight and blah, blah, blah. So I wound up meeting a person who was like, you know, they say that we're living in the Kali Yuga. This person was like that Kali energy where it was just destructive creation, but chaotic passion. So that was my Kali energy came to me, and we had this whirlwind love. And at the time, we had met because he was working on creating an AM radio station in Asbury Park, and they were interested in what I was doing. And I had money at the time, so they thought maybe I wanted to be an investor and have my own show. That didn't pan out, but he and I fell in love fast. And then he's like, you need to meet Richie. He should illustrate the art for your book. Great. He introduces me to Richie. I make this book. All these things. I'm just high on life. And then all of a sudden, my trading platform that all of my savings was in, and mind you, like, I was just a fucking idiot and I didn't have a plan B. I just was like so convinced that this was it and the angels wanted me to do it, and I didn't need to have a plan B. Apparently it got hacked, and overnight I lost everything and didn't have a plan B and didn't really know what I was doing and didn't really have any idea where to go, what to do, who to be, other than what I decided that there was no plan B for. So it was really fucking insane. And the person I was in a relationship with at the time didn't consistently work. So I was not only taking care of myself, trying to build this brand and forge my career path, I was in a really fucked up relationship. And I, no matter what, didn't want to give up. I was just like, all right, well, this is what it is. So I got to do what I got to do to make it work and to figure it out. And I'm not going to lie, the path to creation was filled with tests and tragedy and adversity. And it was honestly one of the most difficult fucking things I've ever done in my entire life. It broke me in ways that I didn't even think I could be broken. But in certain mystery schools, they'll ask if you are prepared for the cost it takes to walk the path. And it wasn't until later in life that I understood that this is the cost it takes to walk the path. If you really believe in something and you really want to do something, you have to have faith in what you're doing. And if it's meant to be, and your power of will and love burns bright enough, all that is obstacle and all that is obscuration will burn away in time. But on the hero's journey, I definitely went through a dark night of the soul and creating Evolve and Ascend and being in this awful relationship and just being tested beyond testing. I wound up leaving that relationship in 2016 after I had just had it. And I just like, I need to find enough strength to follow my dreams fully and to not keep getting stuck in this abyss. And after I had left that relationship, a major, major switch happened and things started to flow. All the tests and trials started to transform into doors opening, portals opening, synchronicity speeding up. And in spring of 2017, my dear friend who I had first connected to when I started Evolve and Ascend and had this idea to create an online learning platform throughout it, I didn't know what I was doing at the time. I had no idea about fucking email list building or community building. I just thought it was the same, like, if you build it, they will come. I had asked somebody that I had met on Twitter, this person, Ben Decker, if he wanted to be our first teacher. And he said yes. It failed epically, but Ben and I became really good friends. And he has been an integral part on my path of guiding me along. And he too will be on the show. But in 2017, he introduced me to Brandy Sabella, who she's heavily involved with Rhythmia and is a partner and in charge of marketing. And he was like, do you guys know each other? I said, no, we should connect. Brandy and I connected. We wound up meeting in person at Oakland Psychedelic Science Convention. And I totally fell in love with her as a human being. She flew me down to Rhythmia. I had life-changing experiences with ayahuasca down there and got the courage to create what I had always wanted to create, which is beyond everything that had kind of started to flow and form at the time. I wanted to create an oracle deck based off of everything I've learned over the last 30 some odd years of trial and tribulation and insight. So I wanted to create an oracle deck based off of the dream that I had had in Costa Rica about Ma'at, and namely the 42 ideals of a Ma'at, but turning it into an oracle deck off of the school of thought and wisdom of which my grandmother had imparted to me. So that summer, around that time, actually it was spring of 2017, I had also connected to Natalie Miller. Natalie Miller is the illustrator of Amenti Oracle and has been one of the great gifts that has come into my life. I found her art on Instagram, and when I saw her art, just did something to me in a way that I can't even explain. I hadn't felt that way since I first saw Aeon Flux, and it's just a cartoon that I used to love as a child. But there was just this sadness and spirit and beauty in the way that the pen and ink hit the paper in her particular style. So I had reached out to Natalie and asked her if she would maybe want to partner on an oracle deck project. So at the time, I was going to self-publish. I didn't really think of it like trying to pitch it to a major publisher. I was like, we can self-publish this, put it through Evolve and Ascend. Evolve and Ascend had grown to like 500,000, or I think like 400,000 at the time on Facebook. And like, we have a network and now I understand what I'm doing. So let's partner on this project and see what happens. So she said yes. At that time, Natalie was actually living in Chicago, but her really close friend, it turned out, was my downstairs neighbor in Asbury Park, which is really fucking weird. So we start working on this project, and this is Amenti Oracle. And as we're working on it, all these crazy synchronicities start to happen. So as a creative and as an Aries only child, I hate nothing more than people telling me what to do or how something should look or how it should feel. So Natalie and I, when we started working on the project, I had asked her, or I had said, let's work on this. Like, I'll send you the card definition and I just want you to draw how it makes you feel. So every card wound up being Natalie's visual interpretation of my words. And it became this crazy psychic synchronicity filled with David Bowie synchronicities, filled with feathers and the Fibonacci sequence, like just so wild. And we'd have these weekly texts of like, what? Oh my God, synchronicity, crazy. I wound up pitching an idea for Rhythmia to have Natalie come down and do plant medicine with me. So we did this, it's artist tries ayahuasca and before and after type of article. So Natalie came down, we journeyed together in Rhythmia. It was just completely such a beautiful week. We came back and the podcast I used to do and feed through Evolve and Ascend was something I called Liberation Frequency. I did about 20 something episodes. And when I was doing episodes, I was working closely with a publishing company called Watkins, and they'd send me their authors. And Watkins' former VP, this man, John Tantera, is always just kind of like a mentor and friend and just like a really lovely being. And he had said to me, if I have a project, feel free to pitch it to him. So as Natalie and I are working on Amenti, we're like, this is really good. There's so much magic happening. Like, maybe we try and pitch it to a publisher and see what happens. So I created a pitch deck, sent it over to John at Watkins. And he said to me, Jen, as a friend, I'm going to tell you this is really, really good and you need to get a literary agent. And as much as we would absolutely publish this, I think you could shoot higher and aim for a mainstream publishing deal. I was like, what? Okay. So I wound up reaching out to my friend Corey Allen, who had just gotten a deal for his book, Now is the Way, asked if he had a literary agent. He introduced me to his, Anna Geller, who is just such an angel. She loved the project. It was her first Oracle deck. She said, I've never sold an Oracle deck before, but let's see. Within like 2 weeks, we had a publishing deal with Running Press Books. And as that whole project wound up going on, I wound up getting gifted a trip to Egypt with Nassim Harriman, and like just so much flow around something where both Natalie and I believe that this project we chose, but also chose us, and was because I truly believe that these words are something so sacred that I acted as a vessel for, to be a custodian of. It's not proprietary to Jen. Amenti is this exploration of unity consciousness and the power of the heart that happened through divine synchronicity for two people that came together to really protect and uphold these ideals. And was nothing short of magic. So Amenti came out into the world in May. It's going to be published by Trey Daniel in French in the coming months. Evolve and Ascend is continuing to grow and thrive. My relationship with Rhythmia has been one of the great catalysts for further becoming who I am. Daniel Pinchbeck is a good friend and contemporary now. Corey Allen wrote the foreword of my book. Richie, who illustrated the kids' book that I wrote, is one of the most cherished, beautiful beings in my entire life. And, while I'm still figuring it out and learning to embody and apply all of the magic and wonder I've learned along the way through this path of self-realization and self-destruction and self-creation, I have really just been humbled and in awe of what can manifest when you follow your dreams and listen to your dreams. And, logic is important, right? To be a balanced person, we need to be equally logical and imaginative. We need to be intuitive, but also to follow reason. But if we can walk the middle way and believe in the power of our dreams, then anything is truly possible. And you can live and create a life that's beyond your imagination. And I'm not going to lie and say that, now here I am and I've achieved these things and I am a perfected being. God, fuck, I'm far from it. And anybody that claims to be within this conscious media space is full of shit. We're all works in progress. And my biggest goal with this podcast, with this transmission, with this honing beacon, if that's a word, right? To try and magnetize people in, is for you to listen and to be inspired and for it to activate courage and awareness within you so that you may follow your dreams, so that you may do everything you've always hoped to do and become everything you've always hoped to be. And remember that you are perfect as you are, and all of the twists and turns and ups and downs and dark nights of the soul are part of the hero's journey and part of your personal mythology. It's part of your personal mythos. We don't watch a movie for the movie to all just be puppies and kitties and rainbows. We see the buildup, we see the climax, we see the resolution, and we feel the adversity and challenge. Anything worth doing and having is worth fighting for, and anything worth being and doing is worth the struggle it takes to get there. And collectively, as a planet, we're all on this phase of struggle. We're in the chrysalis. We have not yet become the butterfly. We're at a time of great change, great adversity, high strangeness. It literally feels like the earth is on fire, metaphorically and literally. And through that fire burns, fire purifies. Fire can devastate, but fire can also create. Now's the time to channel that fire into power and empowerment. And what that means is you stepping into your own personal power to create and do anything you dream of and anything you desire. And by sharing these conversations with luminaries and visionaries and creatives and friends, I hope that you realize that you're not alone on the path. And the path to awakening is fucking hard. It's not like all of a sudden I have achieved instant enlightenment because I took a